Major funding for this program is made possible by grants from HSH Nordbank New York branch and First American Title Insurance Company of New York, Perfect Building Maintenance, Greenberg Traurig LP, Allied Partners, the Moynihan Group. Additional funding for this program is made possible by grants from Antares Real Estate, Arbor Realty Trust, C.B. Richard Ellis, Cushman & Wakefield, Essex Capital Partners, Fremont Investment and Loan, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Muss Development LLC, Rosenthal & Rosenthal Inc., Signature Bank, Stonehenge Partners, Swig Equities, the Engel Berman Group, the Wickoff Group, Titan Capital, YL Real Estate Developers.
My name is Michael Stoller. Welcome to the Stoller Report. New York City is under-retailed. You wouldn't believe New York City is under-retailed. What I mean, there's not enough retailers. But I'm going to tell you today with my guests what's really happening in the New York City retail market. My guests today include David Blumenfeld, Vice President of Blumenfeld Development, Jeff Roseman, Executive Vice President of Newmark Knight Frank, and last but not least, the 800-pound gorilla, not because he's an 800-pound gorilla, Robert Redeker, of Senior Vice President of Forest City Radnor. You're a developer, and you're a broker. But you're not a broker. You're really a guy who senses the scene of what's going on. You control 3.5 million square feet of...
We will at the end of next year, yes.
Okay, 3.5 million square feet of retail. You control 3.5 million square feet of retail. And how much retail do you see in your involvement?
We control the rest. No.
No.
There is, in terms of Manhattan and the boroughs, there's multi-million square feet of space, and we just see it, on an ongoing turnover basis.
So what do you see happening? I mean, Manhattan is an island. Do we see different things happening in Manhattan than we see in other sections?
Well, the demand to come into Manhattan and the boroughs now is like no other time I've ever seen it, and I've been doing this a while. Every national chain, every international chain, every corporate company is looking to set up a retail presence in New York and around, and it's incredible. The demand is so high. And the supply is they're not building. Manhattan's not getting any bigger, so it's a phenomenon. And
but you relate that. Why don't you tell the story about the property, because you're probably the newest and the last large development of retail in Manhattan. What are you doing here?
15 years ago, 12 years ago, it'll be 15 years when it's finished and built. We bought a piece of property up in Harlem for the sole purpose of looking at bringing big box to Manhattan. It was an unheard of concept at the time. No one believed in it. No one actually even believed that a big box would ever go to Harlem, let alone in Manhattan. We always felt that Harlem was a part of Manhattan, so therefore it would work fine. And with the access, it's on the FDR Drive and 116th Street, right at the entrance there, right at the on-ramp and the off-ramp, so we thought it would work fine. It took a long time to get approved. And it's proved out now. We're partners with Forest City Radnor on the project. They've come in the last, how long have you been? 4 years ago you came in as part of the project. And, it's moving. Foundations are going in the ground now. We've signed up Home Depot and Target and Best Buy, and we're moving forward. I think we set a trend. I mean, we broke ground. We made people believe it could work.
Now, will people, besides, how will people have access? I mean, a lot of your sites in Brooklyn and Queens, they can walk over there. Will they be able to do that over there because you're near the highway?
You'll be able to come down 116th Street and walk to the project. There's obviously highway access to the project. There's a 1,248 car parking garage as part of the project. And There's taxi stands built into the project, a bus stop built into the project, so people will come every way they can.
And this will be a 7-day.
It'll operate 7 days a week. There's a belief Home Depot will operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The other retailers will structure their hours based on their, the sales, I guess.
Right, but both of you guys on separate projects have developments in Harlem. And in Harlem, nothing happened. I mean, you guys were, the first project that took place in Harlem was Harlem, USA. Mm-hmm. Then not too far after you came in, right? Mm-hmm. And what did you build over there?
We built Gotham Plaza on 125th Street, which is a mixed-use retail and office space, and the Department of Motor Vehicles as well. So we have a lot of foot traffic from the Department of Motor Vehicles, and with that, we put on the first floor all national retailers in new space, high ceilings, good depths, not what used to be the old storefronts of walk-up buildings, but created real usable space for them, and they are doing big volumes of business there.
Right, and when you opened up in Harlem, what did you do?
Similar, we tried to build a building that allowed the big box retailer to come in. We have Marshalls there, whose entrance is on the second floor. That's their main selling floor. And they're surrounded by a Staples, a CVS pharmacy, and banks, H&M, clothing store. And we built an office building on top.
Before Harlem, USA, I mean, retailers never understood Harlem. It's one of the densest areas you can think of, but the residents always were forced to go shop on 86th Street or 34th Street. And when Harlem, USA opened, and Old Navy and HMV Records and Modell's, I mean, the numbers were just incredible. And I think all the retailers realized that 125th Street was as good a shopping street as there is in the city.
And historically, that's the case. I mean, 125th Street has been a thriving retail corridor in Harlem for many, many, many years, before any of these big box retailers came.
And I actually think before Harlem, USA, was the Pathmark.
Right. That's right.
Which really proved that there is a need for modern retailers to service clients up in Harlem.
But it's interesting. That Pathmark on 125th Street and Lexington Avenue is the highest grossing Pathmark in the chain. The second highest grossing Pathmark is?
Well, within the top 5 is the one in Atlantic Center, and that one opened up in 1996. And at that time, it was the third supermarket in the borough of Brooklyn, which had modern, large supermarket that you would see in the suburbs in a borough of 2.5 million people at that time.
But let's talk about Atlantic Center, because we're going to get over there. I mean, we got a little bit about your side. Atlantic Center is two centers. It's two shopping centers, correct?
Yes, Atlantic Center opened in '96, and an Atlantic Terminal opened up in 2004.
And what's the combined retail space in those two?
Roughly 800,000 feet.
And who are your major tenants over there?
We have Target as our anchor tenant, Burlington Coat Factory, Pathmark, and then in the second tier size, we would have Office Max, Marshalls, Old Navy, DSW, Daffy's, Guitar Center.
Now, it's interesting, those are, none of the, we're talking about stores that have, the regular consumer, and you, Jeff, you've seen stores, because you spend a lot of time in Manhattan. You have stores there, we're going to get over there. You have stores in Manhattan that are really some high-price stores, okay? We were talking prior to the show that rents for stores could be $1,000 a foot. How can a tenant pay these type of rents?
Well, I mean, look at Abercrombie and Fitch, who opened up on 5th Avenue and 56th Street, and they're paying probably a little bit south of $1,000 a foot.
Got to sell a lot of T-shirts.
They are selling a lot of T-shirts. I mean, we've heard sales per square foot. They're north of $3,000 a foot. And if you've ever walked in that store, you can't even get in the door. I mean, the people are teeming in and out of it. And up on Fifth Avenue and Madison Avenue, the tourists. New York is back in a huge way with tourism, and there's a lot of money on the streets, and people are shopping those stores, tremendously. up and down Madison and Fifth.
And how are the Apple stores doing?
I heard, the numbers from Apple they're an anomaly because
right, because of the price.
You hear $5,000-$6,000 a square foot.
Right, but you're talking the price of computers and everything else.
I don't care what it is. Those are big numbers, no matter what you're selling. I mean, the amount of traffic that they're generating in those stores, and
they're open 24 hours a day.
Exactly.
On Fifth Avenue.
A good example is you go to. I know the numbers from about 5 years ago. I haven't looked at them probably since, but about 5 years ago, take a Home Depot. Their national average was $35 million a year in sales per store, nationally, across the country. Long Island, I think their average was $75 million a store on Long Island. They projected for East River Plaza $200 million in sales out of one store. So the rents, when you compare them across the country,
right, based on, but $200 million on I realize, I can understand that if there was no Home Depot. In Manhattan right now, you have a Home Depot on 3rd Avenue, you have a Home Depot on 23rd Street. The Home Depot is not happening down in Lower Manhattan, but you have those. Then you can go up to Westchester, and you have other areas where you can go out to your other shopping center in Queens. I mean,
population density, though, in this area is so far significant to what you see in the suburbs that you can put these stores much closer together than you would normally think of and still do tremendous volumes.
Now, what is, I know I'm a little biased. I got only Forest City, Radnor, and Blumenfeld development here. What is the highest grossing retail complex in the 5 boroughs? Is it the other Queens?
I would have to guess it would be Kings Plaza or maybe Queens Center Mall.
It would be Queens Center or
just
Atlantic,
because of the size of the mall.
Right, because
per square foot, I would think Atlantic Terminal's right in there.
Right. Now, so there's this phenomenon. David was with me last night. We were talking about when Avalon Bay built their facility, their new residential Christie. They built a 74,000 square foot. They didn't, but that's what came out, a 74,000 square foot Whole Foods. And the cost of the entire apartment complex, including the infrastructure and the steel, because you're on top of the subway, was $100 million. And the cost to open up the new Whole Foods that's going to open up on March 21st is $40 million. I mean, how does a Whole Foods go into places? Or can you see a Whole Foods go into other centers in Manhattan or, in any of your places? I mean, you're opening up out in Deer Park. Do you think a Whole Foods would come out to Deer Park, to the Blumenfeld Tanger?
We're negotiating with a Whole Foods out on another center on Long Island right now. I mean, they're out, they're looking for stores. I think unlike some of the other retailers, the supermarkets are sort of the flavor of the month. And Whole Foods is certainly the flavor of the month right now. It was Stop and Shop 3 years ago, and now it's Whole Foods, and it was Pathmark 10 years ago, and it changes. But when they're hot, they have their customer base. They steal customers from other supermarket chains, and they do big volumes. I don't know what AOL Center's doing, but I hear the store is, the #1 grossing supermarket in the country.
I've heard about $60 to $65 million.
Yeah.
There's no competition for the type of variety that they can offer in one location. And they're providing a national platform to advertise it. And they also provide a ready-made food service in a Whole Foods, for example, that Pathmark does at Atlantic Center. And there's a big cash and carry business, certainly at Atlantic Center, where their average purchase is lower than what they see in the suburbs, but the frequency of the visit is greater, and that's because most of the people take what they can home with them by hand. They are not driving, and so they come more frequently.
New Yorkers have been deprived of supermarkets for, when you think about it, there were, 10,000 square foot D'Agostino's and Gristedes, and that's all there was. And in a city like New York, you know, people were buying groceries in Duane Reade and in these small, you know.
You walk, you go into, you know, the interesting thing, you talk about the deprived, you know, Jeff Levine built this building on 32nd Street and Fifth Avenue, and my joke with him on the show was, you know, it's a nice neighborhood, but where are you going to go? You know, ironically, the Walgreens across the street does sell some food.
Right.
There aren't any supermarkets in that neighborhood.
Well, before Whole Foods, I mean, I kind of think Whole Foods looked at, as I looked at when I was looking to buy East River Plaza, the land, Fairway. I mean, that's a perfect example of how deprived New Yorkers were. Here was this, it's 133rd in the west side, under the elevated highway, in an old warehouse, and you would go there on a Saturday, and the cars would be lined up, you know, 20 cars deep to try to get into the parking lot, to go shop at a quality place. I mean, outside was horrible
And the
looking,
cars were
but inside,
BMWs and Mercedes.
yeah,
And
outside looked bad, but inside was quality food for good prices.
It's the Passover and Thanksgiving of the Stolers. We're there also, okay? And it doesn't matter. And now you have the benefit that you can go to the barbecue place, even though you meet over there.
That's
The
right.
barbecue place, you can't even get into either.
Right.
And if you have your bike, they have all the bikers over there. But
We have a Stop and Shop on Northern Boulevard, and you can see from their zip code analysis that many of their shoppers come from the east side of Manhattan because there's a place for them to park, and the stores are open at night, and they can come when there's no traffic. It's only a 15-minute drive, and fill up.
You know, but you have another interesting thing. You know, we're talking about different types of retail. You know, you're on 42nd Street. I still remember dingy 42nd Street, where I said, nah, office buildings wouldn't go. Nobody would want it. Now people are spending $1,200 a foot. I mean, Madame Tussauds, who goes into this place?
About 1 million people a year.
Boy, 1 million people a year go in there. And how's that retail doing over there on 42nd Street?
It's thriving. You have a mixture of tourist retail shops that sell apparel and tourist items, entertainment venues such as BB King's, restaurants, and
your Applebee's doing well?
museums. Applebee's is the #1 in the country.
#1 Applebee's in the country.
Modell's does very well there, selling Yankees, Mets, Giants apparel. Mostly
Certainly there's
tourists.
been a renaissance in New York, which is cleaning up of the crime and fixing up the buildings. And it's, I mean, if it's 42nd Street or Harlem, people are comfortable going to shop now.
right.
You know, Whole
That's
Foods
right.
just signed a lease up on 103rd Street and Columbus, okay, because there's a need in the same way that the Fairway,
And there's the
Fairway I hear,
space.
the Fairway in Red Hook is doing great, okay? So where do you see retail? Do you see this? I mean, if there was more space available, you see only more retail?
It's definitely land-constrained product. To the extent you can find the right size, deep parcel with some parking in some instances or good subway access, the retailers will come and they will pay big rents.
Now I go
to be
to
there.
the situation. My wife says it to me, even though I'm involved with the guys, I'm part of the entity who owns the AOL, the Time Warner Center. I never thought that the retail would do well. Besides Time Warner Center, you've been involved with retail in New York. Why have all the other ones been failures and Time Warner the success?
the vertical retail.
vertical.
I think that you know, New Yorkers were unaccustomed to kind of going multi-level years ago. I mean, that's changed a lot since. I mean, Manhattan Mall, while it's kind of under the radar screen, has always done well.
Yeah, but it was 8 floors, and now it's only 3 floors. You know, there's a big difference of being 8 and 3.
Right.
But the higher-end
Manhattan Mall
restaurants
is-
are on top, and they're destinations.
And also Manhattan Mall, that when you walk into it, it's small. I think in AOL, Time Warner, I mean, it's laid out very well. It's inviting to walk into.
Right.
You look up and you could see every tenant that's in the space, and you're not afraid to go upstairs. I think in Manhattan Mall, it was scary going up to the 8th floor.
No, Manhattan Mall was scary, but Herald Square was even worse.
Herald Center.
Herald Center
Right.
still looks like a schlock center. I mean, there's nothing over there. But you know,
If you build quality, it pays off in spades.
Right. I think now more than ever, vertical retail is not even an issue anymore in the city. And retail, you're going to see retailers start going on 2nd, 3rd, 4th floors. I mean, it's as we said, there's not a lot of space, and New Yorkers are now have proven that they will shop in weird shopping patterns. So,
But it's going to be inviting. I
Right,
mean,
Whole Foods in Union Square is below grade. I mean, the book against about supermarkets. Probably the golden rule is it's got to be convenient, and for them to go completely underground as they are in Time Warner Center, and to do the numbers they're doing, it just shows that New Yorkers will shop if the store is good and if the experience is good.
What are you doing out in the island?
Well, I mean, going back to what you said, if there's space, I mean, there was an opportunity to buy an 80-acre parcel of land on Long Island. It wasn't zoned. Well, retail was a permitted use, but you needed a special permit. We bought it without the approvals. I mean, because it doesn't exist. It's something that didn't exist. So it was worth the risk to get the approval. So now we're building an 800,000 foot. We like to term it smart style because it's a mix of outlet center, with the Tanger Group as our partners, the Apollo Group as our partners, and community-based retail, 16-screen movie theater, health club, the first Christmas tree stores on Long Island to open, an Old Navy, a full-scale Old Navy, but yet we'll have an outlet Gap and Banana. So it's an interesting mix of things, restaurants, sit-down restaurants, no fast food in the way of a Burger King, but maybe but obviously you need your Starbucks. Every lifestyle center has to have its Starbucks. And
Are we over Starbucks?
no, we're never over Starbucks.
There's no problem. We can always have more Starbucks.
Seems that
Basically.
way.
What about banks?
I think that's slowed down a little bit. I think we'll see a little bit of a consolidation.
There's always a pendulum swing with banks.
Right.
What's the flavor? What's the retail flavor of the year? I mean, what is it? Is it Best Buy? I mean, Best Buy is going to your center. They're going into 1800 Broadway. They're on Fifth Avenue. They're on 86th Street. So is it Best Buy? We know it's Whole Foods. I mean, besides Whole Foods, what is the retailer that you guys see as the flavor? Who's the big one?
We're starting to see a lot of international retailers come in now. If you've seen this Uniqlo down in Soho, which is, they built a 60,000 foot, they're like a better version of Old Navy, I guess, is how they're, but, they're coming in big. H&M, obviously, has blazed the trail. You're seeing Zara and Mango start to expand a little bit more. Company just opened in Forest Cities building this Muji, a huge Japanese retailer. So we're starting to see, besides for the nationals who were coming in and have been coming in, the internationals now are we're really starting to notice them coming in.
Speaking about that, who else is going to be in the Times Center?
Not determined yet. There'll be a mix of restaurants, Starbucks, hopefully. We'll have to see.
And you guys are doing something in Yonkers?
We are. We're building a lifestyle center in excess of 1 million square feet, which will have movie theater, stadium seating movie theater, state-of-the-art. Some of the big boxes that we've been talking about today, as well as your typical higher-end apparel, your Abercrombie & Finch, your Sephora, the Banana Republics of the world.
Now, I remember a couple of years ago, movie theaters were really hurting. Are movie theaters doing well now?
Movie theaters revamped themselves. They came out with stadium-style seating, big lounges, preferred seating. Now I'm being told by the people at United Artists Regal that they are looking at bringing in fine dining into the movie theater.
Right. They have to create an environment that's within their own building that is a night out. And so they're starting to...
Oh, are we going to see bowling alleys again?
Yeah, I think you will.
Yeah, I do too.
Really?
Yes.
I mean, the new one in Harlem is doing well. Beaumont does well.
Yes.
I mean, I don't.
You're going to see them in movie theaters. How about that? They're going to be, it's going to be an
the old movie theaters, the 5 and 6
Yeah.
screens that the movie theater companies no longer want to operate.
No,
They're-
but I heard either Movie Co. or one of the CFOs or somebody left Movie Co. started his own company. His new concept is movie theater, bowling alley, dinner, and another concept, all in one building, and it's a night out.
What do you see happening? How high can rents go for retailers in Manhattan?
I think that they're pretty high right now. They're at a peak. I mean, a lot of the sales of the buildings and the buildings that get traded over and over again, just keep driving up the rents. And when you have, say, banking wars in the city where there's 4 different banks vying for each spot, I mean, that contributes to the rents going up. But as we see a consolidation in that, I think you'll see a little bit of a correction in some of the markets. I think what we're seeing, though, is we're seeing some other markets kind of come back. I think there's a lot of secondary markets in the city that will benefit from kind of the high rents of Midtown. And
Speaking of that, what's the best retail in Manhattan?
best retail.
Street. Best, is it Herald Square? Is it Times Square? Is it 59? I mean, if you had...
Yes, the answer. I mean,
yes.
Yes, it's Herald Square. It's Times Square. Broadway and Soho is as hot as it gets. Madison Avenue is hot. Fifth Avenue is hot.
What about all these stores that are opening up in Lower Manhattan, the Hermes and the other things? What do you think of those?
Great. I think it's great.
You think are they opening because the rents are so cheap, or are they opening?
Well, the rents aren't so cheap. I think there's business. No.
Where are you talking?
Hermes. I heard they're in for $35.
No.
Where they open?
They open down on downtown in the financial district.
It's a long-term play.
Yeah, we did a
There's the
deal with
Cedar
Tiffany's down
revitalization.
there. I mean, they're paying big rents down there. I mean, again, Lower Manhattan is the size of many cities, so there's enough density, certainly commercial and now residential, that I think they'll do fine. I think they could use a supermarket down there.
The next
but you
Soho
have-
really is the next Soho.
Yeah, agreed.
I mean, what about the Seaport? Because do you think they're going to close the Seaport, the South Street Seaport?
I think they're going to redo it, right? I mean, clearly it's in need of a redo. It wasn't, it's...
Why? What was the failure of the Seaport? I mean, you guys have been in retail. You've been in retail. What's been the failure of the Seaport?
It wasn't laid out well.
well-
I believe it wasn't laid out well.
No
I mean, I think
large
that
anchor.
was the biggest failure of it. It just wasn't inviting to go to. It was a perimeter walkway, not very accessible. You couldn't see everything about it, and it wasn't great looking.
Right. And as 4 New Yorkers here, I'm sure none of us went there, ever to spend a Saturday. I mean, it was just not inviting. There was no reason to go down there. It was kind of like
And the
any other
tenant mix
mall.
was bad.
Right. Exactly.
It had the inappropriate tenant mix.
That was probably one of the bigger
think that
factors.
You asked what's the best retail location. The best retail location is different for each retailer, I think.
Yes.
I mean, you would know that better than I would. But I think each location requires a tenant mix.
That's right.
Hard to believe, but 30 minutes have passed, and I think my audience has got a pretty good perspective on retail, which, according to Mr. Roseman, I have failed to talk about over the past years. So today we've changed that perspective. I'd like to thank my guests, David Blumenfeld of Blumenfeld Development, Jeffrey Roseman of Newmark Knight Frank, and Robert Redeker of Forest City Ratner for being here.
Thank you.
See you next week, and we're going to be talking about Lower Manhattan, residential in Lower Manhattan.
Major funding for this program is made possible by grants from HSH Nordbank New York branch and First American Title Insurance Company of New York, Perfect Building Maintenance, Greenberg Traurig LP, Allied Partners, the Moynihan Group. Additional funding for this program is made possible by grants from Antares Real Estate, Arbor Realty Trust, C.B. Richard Ellis, Cushman & Wakefield, Essex Capital Partners, Fremont Investment and Loan, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Muss Development LLC, Rosenthal & Rosenthal Inc., Signature Bank, Stonehenge Partners, Swig Equities, the Engel Berman Group, the Wickhoff Group, Titan Capital, YL Real Estate Developers.